Israel has come out with another round of propaganda videos, this time about Al-Shifa Hospital. And this is important because if you remember, Israel was made very, very big claims that the Hamas headquarters, their command center, was below Al-Shifa Hospital. Al-Shifa being the largest hospital in Gaza, with many people being treated there, children in NICU there, elderly. This is a sophisticated, big hospital in Gaza, and the IDF insisted the Hamas headquarters was underneath. Now, they have been in this hospital and have had control over this hospital for the last several days, and yet we have yet to see clear, definitive evidence that gives justification for them targeting a hospital, a civilian hospital, that is protected under the Geneva Convention. So this is pretty serious. This is similar to, not as great, but it's akin to weapons of mass destruction, making a claim that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction and we need to invade Iraq because these weapons of mass destruction are there. This is a very similar, although on a smaller scale, the IDF saying there are weapons of mass destruction underneath this hospital and we have to invade it, and a lot of lives are going to die. And you had government officials chuckling over the fact that 500,000 children died in Iraq. Oh, well, I guess you got to do what you got to do. It's too bad. It's really too bad. But Saddam Hussein shouldn't have had weapons of mass destruction, and now all of his people died. 500,000 kids died. Oh, well. And it all ended up not being true. We're seeing this sort of deja vu happen again with Al-Shifa Hospital and this idea that there was a Hamas command center. I want to show you their latest video. So they've had a difficult time producing evidence. We've gone over the videos that they've released last week of them walking through the actual hospital or the basement of a Rantisi hospital. And then when it comes to Al-Shifa, they were walking around in the actual hospital, if you remember. So not underneath, not in tunnels, not in bunkers, but in the actual MRI section of the hospital, claiming that the evidence that Hamas was using it as a headquarters was because some of the video cameras were taped off. They had found some weapons, and so therefore it was clearly a place where Hamas was using. Here's their latest. They've now uncovered a hole in the ground, a tunnel under the ground, meters away from the hospital. This is not directly, you can see here in this video where this tunnel is, so it's quite a ways from the hospital itself. And they're saying that this is an operational tunnel shaft. They then have this drone going down into this tunnel, and you could see this tunnel that they've uncovered. It's filled with a lot of metal and debris. I don't know how a person goes down there, if they say that they bombed it or, this doesn't look like people go down this tunnel necessarily, but they're saying, okay, there's these stairs, so maybe, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Certainly we know, we're going to keep watching this footage here, but we know that Hamas has tunnels. That's not in dispute. We know that they have a vast tunnel network that goes in many parts of Gaza, underneath many of the buildings. That has been used by the IDF as a reason to target all of these civilian buildings because there's a vast network of tunnels underneath the buildings. Many of us do not believe that that is an adequate excuse for bombing civilians and killing thousands upon thousands of civilians. So you can see they go down this tunnel, which again has a lot of debris, so it's questionable like how this is being used by humans. Now the video switched. You could see the video switch, and I'll explain that. There's actually, Freddie Ponton did a great explanation of this. But then you see this video here of now a tunnel that can be, that you can walk through. And you can see that this is not a drone footage because you could see the camera shaking back and forth, like wobbling like someone walking. And you go through this tunnel, and then we're going to get to a door, a blast door. So they're claiming that this is evidence, again, of the tunnels underneath Al-Shifa Hospital and the what would be the Hamas headquarters. But we don't see anything more. They don't open up that door, and they don't go any further there. So now, again, we know that there's tunnels underneath Gaza. That's not in dispute. The question was whether or not the tunnels being used under Al-Shifa were the Hamas headquarters, where they were basing their operations, which is why it went under heavy fire and why ultimately the hospital ceased to operate. I don't know if it's operating at all at this moment or if it's operating on life support. It's the vast majority of it is not operational. Here is a video. This is the IDF spokesperson, Lieutenant Colonel Richard. He is talking about Al-Shifa Hospital, and he's going to explain it. So let's hear from him. Do we have this video of... Okay. Oh, we don't have that. Sorry, I didn't ask for that video. So, but he basically is saying, you could see here that this is Al-Shifa Hospital, and here's the tunnel in the hole, and he kind of is explaining it a little bit more. It's real quick. It's not long, 30 seconds. So he doesn't say a whole lot. He just says basically what you saw in that drone footage. Here's Freddie Ponton. He actually did a look at this tunnel video, more at this, and is going to break down what we're looking at. And he did a really great breakdown. I saw other breakdowns on a lot of questions about this tunnel, but I think that he had a really good explanation. So he says, let's look at the alleged tunnels and what they went through. So he says, you know, where is the tunnel shaft? Where does the tunnel lead? Who actually filmed in the tunnel? IDF video editing cut to mislead, and the conclusion. So let's go through what he has to say. With his investigation, he says, where is the tunnel? Well, the entrance of the alleged Hamas tunnel shaft is 2 meters inside the Al-Shifa complex, literally on your right as you enter the complex via IBN Sina Road. The burn unit is on your left as you enter. So it's not directly under the building. It's in the complex of the hospital, but it's not underneath, you know, the hospital buildings themselves. So that's where the tunnel is. So it's an operational tunnel shaft. So you could see more of the images that he puts out there. Okay, so then he goes on to say, where is the tunnel? Where does the tunnel lead? He says, by studying several videos from the alleged Hamas shaft and tunnel, we were able to determine that the tunnel actually goes under Ibn Sina Road and not toward the Al-Shifa Hospital. So in looking at the direction of the video, they found that it went to Ibn Sina Road and not underneath. So he says, who actually filmed in the tunnel? Because you see that there's a change from the drone footage that was being lowered through the tunnel, and then suddenly the camera switches and it becomes shaky video like someone walking. And they were actually able to assess that, in their opinion, a dog was fitted with a camera, and it was actually, the dog was lowered into the shaft and sent to investigate the tunnel. And this explains why there was no sound recorded. It also explains why the door was not, they didn't attempt to open the door. So the tunnel is very small. This is a small tunnel. A dog is walking through this. And he says, he goes on to say, here we can see what we believe to be a dog handler who was preparing the red rope to lower a dog. At the bottom of the stairs, the tunnel was likely too small for a person, so they sent a dog to investigate, and the man with the red harness isn't going into the hole, the dog is. So they show what looks like, you know, this petting the dog, harnessing, you know, getting the dog ready to go. Then he says that the IDF video was edited and it was meant to mislead. Says with the help of Sufyan, we were able, from the JBLX, we were able to spot an editing cut in the IDF alleged Hamas tunnel video. The editing cut was necessary because the change of direction makes it obvious that the tunnel is going under Ibn Sina Road. So they're saying that the editing cut... then he says, as we said above, the access to the tunnel at the bottom of the shaft is likely only accessible to a rescue or military dog. The tunnel also appears to be high when in fact it isn't. The right and left rocking of the IDF footage is very typical. So the conclusion, he says, is we've decided to leave other anomalies aside for now. However, the IDF claim of an alleged Hamas tunnel at the Al-Shifa Hospital is rather exaggerated, if not misleading. Pressure to deliver a Hamas tunnel to the public might have contributed to this circus. So that is Freddie Ponton's assessment of this. I have seen other assessments where people do know people in Gaza, or maybe even Hamas members that they were able to speak to, and they said that the initial tunnel is not a Hamas tunnel. The initial shaft that shows, with the stairs going down, he's saying that is not a Hamas tunnel, but the second tunnel is a Hamas tunnel. So there's theories that because there was that editing cut, that this was a completely different tunnel in a different spot. That to me, if it's the dog, then it would make sense. You'd go from drone footage to dog footage. That would make sense as an edit. But look, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is, did you see a Hamas headquarters? That's the question. We know there are Hamas tunnels. We know even that in 1983, Israel dug their own tunnels and bunker underneath Al-Shifa hospital. They built a network of tunnels. This is known. This is factual. It was reported on by Israeli magazines. They've known about this for a long time from the 2014 invasion into Gaza. There was the question of how does Israel know that there's this tunnel system, because they were claiming in 2014 that Hamas was operating under Al-Shifa hospital. The Israeli journalist said, well, how do you know? And Israel says, well, because we built them. We built the bunker. We built an operational room, and we built a network of tunnels. So they know that these exist. They did it in 1983. Hamas would, in my mind, I would think, use them if they're there, if they're available to be used. It depends, unclear. Would they use them for a headquarters? Would they use them to just go through and pass things along, weapons, people? I don't know. But what we're looking for and what the evidence needs to show is not the fact that they have weapons. We know that with weapons of mass destruction. We knew Iraq had weapons. The question was, did they have weapons of mass destruction? So in this case, we know they have tunnels. The question was this a tunnel? Was this headquarters for Hamas under an Al-Shifa hospital? That's the question. So they keep showing us tunnels. They keep showing us shafts that lead down it. Yes, we know. And when they show us this, what happens in social media is that people tend to want to deny everything. The people that want to not believe anything Israel says almost goes down the path of claiming there are no tunnels. And you want to be careful not to do that. We know there are tunnels. There are absolutely tunnels. That is known. Hamas admits that. There's nothing new about that. The question is, are these tunnels that are actually being used as a headquarters that would justify the level of death and destruction that Israel imparted on these civilians? Here's another piece of video that they released claiming that this does justify their attack on Al-Shifa hospital. They tweeted this out. This is the State of Israel's Twitter account. They were repeating what the IDF said, saying, breaking, the IDF released CCTV footage from the Shifa hospital with an October 7th timestamp documenting Hamas terrorists forcibly transferring hostages, a Nepalese civilian and a Thai civilian, through the hospital. These findings prove that the Hamas terrorist organization used the Shifa hospital complex on the day of the massacre as terrorist infrastructure. So you watch this video here, and you see them bringing in somebody. And here they are. Now, some people have pointed to the clock on the wall saying that doesn't match the timestamp on the video, but the clock's not moving. The second hand isn't moving. This person's injured, clearly. They're bleeding. And they're being taken to a hospital. And then the doctors go in. So this person is being treated at a hospital. What we're seeing in this footage, the IDF and the State of Israel is trying to claim that, these are hostages and they're being transported through the hospital. So the hospital is being used as a transport place, and yet what we're seeing is people who are injured being taken in, maybe to operating rooms or wherever. Now, Hamas issued a statement. They said, we said early on that we transferred many of the occupation's prisoners to hospitals to receive treatment and undergo surgical operations, especially after some of them were injured as a result of the occupation's aircraft bombing them. We risked our fighters to guarantee the injured prisoners the best possible treatment in Gaza Strip hospitals. Gaza, and we published many pictures about this, and the spokesperson for the occupation army presents the matter as if they have discovered something great and taking care of the prisoners, treating them, and giving them the possible medical care is a point for us, not against us. We've known that these prisoners, he's right. I mean, the Hamas is right on this statement, whoever issued this statement, that we've known from the beginning that prisoners were taken to hospitals. There were reports of hostages in the hospitals being treated. Some of them did not make it. Maybe some of them did, but that has been reported on pretty early on. So this isn't really, what IDF is showing us is just people being taken to a hospital potentially for treatment. Another point on this is, remember when he was walking through the hospital initially and claiming, the IDF spokesperson, Jonathan Conricus, was claiming that, well, it was obviously Hamas headquarters because they taped over the video cameras. But here's the video cameras. So how does that make sense? If this was the Hamas headquarters, I thought they taped over the video cameras. Some other updates on some of the previous videos that had been released by the IDF. So believe everything with your own eyes. I mean, it's up to you. Look at the evidence. You decide. I have not seen a Hamas headquarters yet. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It may. Maybe the IDF will uncover it. But at this point, they have not presented me enough evidence for me to say, yep, this makes sense why you had to bomb innocent civilians in a hospital and kill off people that were on life support. Makes sense. I get it now. You guys are right. I haven't seen that evidence. And I require that level of evidence in order for me to justify the breaking of a Geneva Convention, the commission of a war crime. I would have to see a bit more evidence on that. CNN and BBC, when they looked over the evidence that was given in the previous videos, when Jonathan Conricus was walking around Al-Shifa Hospital and saying, see this, the cameras are taped over, look at this, these are grab bags, these are Hamas grab bags, and they're grabbing these weapons so that they could just grab and go. That is what this is. Well, the CNN and BBC actually were able to get reporters in the room after the IDF went and did their videotaping, and they have determined that there were some misrepresentation of facts and likely some planted evidence. CNN, of all networks, actually says video suggests IDF may have rearranged weaponry at Al-Shifa prior to news crew visit. So they're saying in this headline, you could see it here, that the analysis suggests that the IDF rearranged weaponry prior to them arriving. So they're even calling it out, saying, yeah, this evidence looks planted. CNN is saying that. Here's BBC. We're going to show you a little bit of video here. This is BBC also saying the same thing, that not really sure if this is believable, guys. Watch this.
Well, BBC Verify has been examining the different sources of information that we have on this. Israel describes the Al-Shifa hospital as the main headquarters for Hamas's terrorist activity. This IDF animation, posted in late October, claims to represent a Hamas tunnel system underneath the hospital. But having been inside Al-Shifa since early Wednesday, Israel's yet to produce evidence of the tunnels. It has allowed the BBC and Fox News to film at the hospital, though only locations of Israel's choice.
This is what they found.
Israel also released its own 7-minute video, which BBC Verify has analysed. A watch visible in that video suggests it was filmed a few hours before the BBC arrived. And this IDF video was posted, then deleted, then reposted, this time without a section referring to an Israeli soldier who'd been held hostage.
I don't know when this was used the last time.
Also in the video, we see a room with an MRI machine.
And if you zoom in and we get some light over here, what you'll be able to see is military equipment.
The BBC was shown the same room. And what we see in the two videos doesn't precisely match. For example, there's one gun in the IDF video, two by the time of the BBC footage. Israel has told BBC Verify this is because more weaponry and terrorist assets were discovered throughout the day.
And as always, an AK-47.
Israel also says its video is a single shot with no edits. But this appears to be an edit. We don't know the reasons for that edit, nor how significant it is. The IDF, though, says suggestions it's manipulating the media are incorrect. The IDF video also shows military equipment in other locations, though we can't verify how it came to be there. And what we see in this IDF video doesn't equate to Israel's description of Al-Shifa as an operational command center for Hamas. The US is using a different phrase, saying Al-Shifa was used as a command and control node. That implies a much smaller facility.
So the WHO was able to actually go into Al-Shifa hospital. They said that it was a joint UN humanitarian assessment team. They said it was very high risk because this is a conflict zone. So they were able to go in very briefly. They said that they, due to time limits associated with the security situation, the team was able to spend only 1 hour inside the hospital, which they described as a death zone and the situation as desperate. Signs of shelling and gunfire were evident. The team saw a mass grave at the entrance of the hospital and were told more than 80 people were buried there. Lack of clean water, fuel, medicines, food, and other essential aid over the last 6 weeks have caused Al-Shifa Hospital, once the largest, most advanced, and best equipped referral hospital in Gaza, to essentially stop functioning as a medical facility. They went on to say that given the current state of the hospital, which is no longer operational or admitting new patients, the team was requested to evacuate health workers and patients to other facilities. The WHO reiterates its plea for collective efforts to bring an end to the hostilities and humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and we call for an immediate ceasefire. So what they saw on the ground, they said, was atrocious at this hospital. Now, look, Gaza's been under bombardment. They have lost, thousands of people have been killed now, thousands of children. The numbers are 11,000 people, over 11,000 people have been killed, over 5,000 children have been killed, and they're running out of hospitals. And it's not because the hospitals are full. We saw that during the COVID pandemic, right? Oh, the hospital's overwhelmed, the hospital's overwhelmed. These hospitals are non-existent because they're being bombed. And the justification to bomb these hospitals is that they're operating Hamas command centers, and that wiping out these hospitals would effectively end the war, end the hostilities, because it would wipe out Hamas. And that is not what has happened at all. This has instead been a farce. The evidence that Israel has provided has been a joke. It has been laughable. This is not evidence of a Hamas headquarters. Finding a few guns in a grab bag, which have been planted, according to the CNN and BBC, is not evidence of a Hamas headquarters. This is shameful. This is atrocious, and this has to end. These people need medical care. Children are burned. Children are maimed. They do not have, some of them have their legs blown off, their arms blown off, and they do not have adequate access to medical care to be treated appropriately. Many of them will die from injuries alone. The death toll in Gaza is much, much greater than 11,000 people who have died so far. We don't even know how many people will die because of their sustained injuries. Lastly, before we go, I want to show this map because now the IDF unable to find Hamas's headquarters. So this is more evidence that they do not know where this headquarters is. They have now guided everybody to leave the northern region into the southern region, but more so into that tiny little orange area right there. See that tiny little orange area? That little orange area is where they're now telling everybody to go. In this, this map was released by Israel. They wrote this post in Arabic in order to get the people to leave. And they've said, I'm just going to read to you. I'm going to translate it for you. But they say, "Oh, residents of Gaza, especially residents of the northern Gaza Strip, to the residents of the neighborhoods," and they list off the various neighborhoods, "we urge you to evacuate your residential areas immediately in order to preserve your safety via this particular road in the evening to reach the southern Gaza Valley and the humanitarian zone. And we urge you to evacuate urgently because it is dangerous for you to remain there. We will implement a temporary tactical suspension of military activities during the day, specifically between 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon for humanitarian purposes in the Rafah camp area." So they're trying to get everybody to this, moving to this Rafah camp. So imagine the Gaza Strip is already the smallest. I mean, look at the area they've carved out. It looks like a miniature version of Gaza. So Gaza is already one of the most condensed populated areas on the planet. And now they're telling everybody in the north, and they told everybody to move south. They're now evacuating people from the south and the north, even further into this more condensed, miniaturized looking version of Gaza. And they're trying to get all 2.2 million people in this tiny, tiny little area where they've set up tents. At least they're providing that. But they are trying to get everybody to evacuate even further. So they've now said, because of Hamas, they've moved the headquarters. They've said that the headquarters is no longer at Al-Shifa Hospital. Instead, it is moved to the south, and they have named it, and they're targeting it. And they're trying to get everybody to move into this little strip that they say, well, this doesn't have Hamas in this little tiny miniaturized Gaza. There's no Hamas there. I just want to point out that this is, I've been saying this from the beginning, that the goal is to move everybody to the Rafah crossing, to the Egyptian border, and to ultimately move everybody into Egypt. This is an ethnic cleansing campaign. This is clearly, they're going to create such a humanitarian catastrophe to try to get everybody to just move and to pressure Egypt into taking all of these people and putting them in the Sinai Peninsula rather than in remaining in Israel and remaining in Gaza, remaining in what would be Palestine. Here's an article from Haaretz saying that Israeli rightists are trying to reframe a Gaza population transfer as a moral act. So we're seeing this new trend, and this new trend is that it's no longer these ultra far right activists who are calling for the removal of Palestinians from the land. It's now bled into more mainstream right-wing politics. So it says Israeli rightists are trying to reframe a Gaza population transfer as a moral act. The idea of expelling Arabs to other countries was once linked to Mir Kahan and other far-right radicals, and thus considered anathema by most Israelis. Now, to the delight of right-wingers, the idea is gaining traction as a moral solution to the war. We're seeing more and more Israeli politicians saying it's the only humane thing to do. The only humane thing to do is for these people to seek refuge in Egypt, is for them to be, I read one Israeli Knesset member saying that they should be voluntarily moved to Egypt for humanitarian reasons, and that the world should support this move of the Palestinian people into Egypt instead. Here's a Reuters article saying something similar. Israeli minister calls for voluntary immigration of Gazans. So they're wanting, it says a senior far-right member of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government said on Tuesday Gaza would not survive as an independent entity and it would be better for Palestinians to leave for other countries. This is how they frame it. They frame it as, it's just good for you. You need to go. You need to get out of here. It's not because we want to get rid of you, even though we're bombing you to oblivion and we're the ones causing the destruction. This is not a natural disaster. Egypt isn't taking you in because of a bad hurricane or earthquake, and now your lives are ruined and they just need to take you for humanitarian reasons. We're bombing the hell out of you. And we could stop at any moment, but why would we when we know that really we're creating a humanitarian crisis and you're better off just leaving for Egypt? It's just the humane thing. It's just the humane thing to support, that we want to take the land. We want to steal the land, take it for ourselves, and demolish the idea of a two-state solution. Won't happen, ain't happening. Get out of here, go to Egypt. That's what many of them are saying. That is ethnic cleansing. That is a genocide. That is exactly the definition of that. If you don't want to call it that, I don't know exactly what your definition of a genocide or ethnic cleansing is. The United States said that there were, well, I don't want to quote it because I don't remember it exactly, but there's a question about genocide and using that term genocide. And some people say, well, okay, but a genocide is eradicating people from a region or eradicating a state, either getting rid of a nation or a people. Well, I don't know what else to call this. Because when you're saying to people, get out of here, you're not going to have a Palestine. We're getting rid of the Palestinian, the idea of a Palestine, and we're getting rid of the Palestinian people. I don't know what else you call that. A lot of people want to say, well, no, genocide is when you're wanting to kill all the people. That is not true. That is not what a genocide is. The Jewish people endured a genocide during World War II, and they're not all dead. In fact, they have an entire nation of Jews, right? So they're not dead. They weren't eradicated. That's not what a genocide is. Yet we still label the Holocaust a genocide. There's a reason for that, because the genocide does not mean necessarily the eradication of all people from existence. It means getting rid of people from a region, either through extermination or expulsion. And you could do it one of those two ways. Or you can make their lives so miserable that they are inhumane. They're viewed as animals by the people who are above them and controlling them. And in this situation, what we're seeing is a genocide. We're seeing the blatant attempt to eradicate a group of people and a nation from a land. According to Benjamin Netanyahu, there will be no Palestine. He has made that clear. Many of the people in his government are calling for the expulsion of the Palestinian people in their entirety, not just Hamas, not just the terrorists. They're saying they're all Hamas, get rid of all of them. That is a genocide. There's really no other term for that other than genocide. That's what that word means. Words have meaning. This is what that word means. This is what is happening and what many are calling for in this region. And as they have, Gaza is now under control. The northern strip of Gaza is under the control of Israel. They're not letting people in that region. They're now claiming Hamas has moved to the south. They're now pushing people into a tinier region. And they're going to try to push them to that border. And they're going to pressure Egypt. And I'll tell you what, Egypt just might do it. And the reason why Egypt just might do it, as much as Egypt has said we're not doing it, Egypt might do it because Egypt is on the U.S. welfare program. They are the second largest recipient of U.S. money behind Israel for a reason, because it's good if we could control Egypt at the behest of Israel, do whatever Israel wants with Egypt, and we could control Egypt. So we keep them on a welfare program. And that Sinai Peninsula was given back to Egypt after the war. Israel had occupied that land for quite some time, ultimately ended up giving it back to Egypt. So there's a bit of history there. There's motivation there. There's money there. And there's a possibility that the U.S. and Israel rally up all their friends and say, hey, let's get a bunch of money together and just force Egypt to take them and promise that we'll support them and build their lives in the Sinai Peninsula until Israel says, well, we want that area too, because it's a security threat. They're still on the border of Israel. No matter where you move them, they're still going to be right there on the border. And then it would be just another reason for Israel to say, well, we have to invade the Sinai Peninsula because these Hamas terrorists are still there at our border, threatening our people. It never ends. It never ends. And it hasn't for these Palestinian people who've been living like this for the last 75 years, being shoved around, pushed around, told that they don't belong on the land that they've lived on for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, some of them, because another group of people came along and said, hey, this is ours actually, because God said so in a book. So that, whether you believe that or not, this is a dire humanitarian situation and terrible. And I don't know what else you could call it besides genocide or ethnic cleansing.